gas for it so you don't get burned up.
Alright, we have this one done. And I have this one here already started, and I've already done this one. So we're going to find which one that this one goes to when we get down to it. I'm having to turn them to make sure the colors are right here.
You're not going to believe what I found. To my knowledge, I'm the first person to put this on YouTube. It's an official UN document that the global elites don't want you to talk about. The United Nations published this replacement migration report back in 2000, and guess what? They laid out the blueprint for what we're seeing in full force today. This report proposes using migration, yes, mass immigration, as a solution to declining and aging populations in developed nations like the United States, France, Germany, and Japan. Now, this isn't just about a few immigrants crossing borders. No, we're talking about a systematic overhaul of entire populations. Look at the numbers in the report. Italy, for example, is predicted to see its population shrink by a whopping 28% by 2050 without migration. What does the UN propose to stop this replacement migration on a massive scale? For Italy, they suggest needing 12.6 million migrants. For the entire European Union, 47 million migrants by 2050. Let that sink in. But here's the kicker. This isn't just some far-off theory. We're seeing this play out right now. The southern border of the United States is being flooded with migrants, and Europe is facing a migrant crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before. All the while, politicians and global elites keep telling us that this is necessary. This report talks about maintaining the working age population. They throw around terms like support ratios and demographic trends. Let's be clear, this isn't just about immigration. This is about transforming entire nations through demographic engineering. They're not just addressing a natural issue like aging populations. We're seeing millions pour over the border, and it's no accident. This is by design. The globalists want to tear down borders, blur cultures, and make us all part of a controlled system. The crime rates are rising, the political divide is deepening, and the social fabric is being torn apart. I'm going to show you exactly how these plans are connected to today's migration crises. First, understand that this isn't a grassroots movement of desperate people fleeing bad situations. No. This is orchestrated, folks. The globalists are using migration as a tool to disrupt national stability and dilute the cultural and political power of sovereign nations. It's all about control. By flooding countries with mass migration, they destabilize local economies, strain social services, and ultimately weaken the political voice of the native population. This is classic divide and conquer on a global scale. We're seeing the fallout in real time. In the United States, the Biden administration is allowing wave after wave of migrants to enter the country illegally, and the mainstream media doesn't even bat an eye. Why? Because it's part of a much larger agenda, the same one outlined in the 2000 UN report. Remember, they framed it as a solution to aging populations and low birth rates. But what they didn't emphasize is the sheer volume of migrants needed to sustain these support ratios. Think about this. To stabilize Europe's workforce, the UN estimates 161 million migrants would be needed by 2050. That's not just a number, that's a complete demographic transformation. In the US, they predict 593 million migrants would be required to keep up with the demands of an aging population by maintaining the ratio of working-age individuals to retirees. We are witnessing the tip of this iceberg right now with the migrant crisis at the southern border. Look at how this affects us directly. When you bring in this level of migration, it puts immense strain on public resources. Schools are overwhelmed, healthcare systems buckle, crime rates surge, and housing becomes scarce. Meanwhile, the globalists sit back and watch as the middle class is eroded, replaced with a population that's more dependent on government handouts and less likely to push back against authoritarian policies. But it's not just about economics or social strain. There's a deeper, more sinister agenda here. By displacing native populations, the globalists aim to erase national identities. They want a borderless world where people are easier to control, where cultural differences are flattened, and where we all fit into their technocratic vision. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory. It's happening, and the UN Replacement Migration Report laid out the playbook decades ago. And if you think this is limited to the US and Europe, think again. The elites are pushing the same agenda in countries across the globe. Africa, Asia, South America, they're all being set up as pawns in this global chess game. The migrant crisis is just one front in a much larger war for control over populations. This isn't some hidden document. It's been out in the open for years, and it lays out the playbook for what we're seeing unfold in real time. The text from this report outlines how countries like Japan, Italy, and Germany are facing declining populations due to below replacement fertility rates. And what's their solution? Mass immigration. In scenario 4 of the report, the UN calculates how many migrants are needed to maintain the size of the working age population in these nations. The numbers are staggering. In Germany, for instance, the report suggests that over 24 million migrants would be needed to maintain its working age population between 2000 and 2050. Italy would need 19.6 million immigrants over the same period. Folks, these are not small numbers. They're talking about replacing significant portions of national populations with foreign migrants. Now, if we connect this to the current migrant crisis, the parallels are crystal clear. Right now, Western nations, especially those in Europe and North America, are witnessing massive influxes of migrants. We're seeing these migration flows overwhelm social services, reshape communities, and cause social unrest. But, as outlined in the Replacement Migration Report, this is exactly the kind of scenario the global elites are banking on. The UN's replacement migration agenda is essentially a demographic weapon. They're pushing for these migrant waves not just to shore up population numbers, but to dilute national identities and shift political power. In countries like the US and the UK, they're not just trying to solve aging population issues, they're reshaping the entire social and political landscape. This is part of the broader strategy to centralize control and subjugate sovereign nations under a globalist agenda. This scenario assumes that in order to keep the potential support ratio, the ratio of working-age individuals to retirees, the numbers of migrants required would be astronomically high. For example, Japan would need over 500 million immigrants by 2050 to maintain its PSR. That's right, 500 million. The European Union would require nearly 700 million immigrants. These numbers are mind-blowing and would utterly transform the cultural, social, and political structures of these nations. So what's the end game here? Look around you. This mass immigration is about engineering chaos. Governments and elites know that such drastic demographic shifts lead to tension, social fragmentation, and a loss of national cohesion. And in the chaos, they expand their power. This is when they implement surveillance systems, digital IDs, and global governance structures. It's all connected, folks. The crisis creates the need for solutions, and those solutions are always about controlling us more. The current migrant crisis isn't a humanitarian emergency. It's a calculated move. Governments like the US and nations across Europe are being flooded with migrants in a move that's been telegraphed by the UN for years. The Replacement Migration Report is the roadmap, and what we're witnessing now is the execution of that plan. This is why we see globalist organizations like the World Economic Forum pushing for open borders, digital tracking, and increased surveillance. They're paving the way for global control, where national sovereignty is eroded, and we are all just data points in a technocratic system. And this crisis isn't just a byproduct of economic or social policies. It's by design. The UN's Replacement Migration Report laid out the blueprint for how mass migration could be used to reshape populations and cement global control. Today, as borders crumble and migrants flood into nations by the millions, the true nature of this plan is becoming more obvious. The elites are creating the problem, and their solution is more control over every aspect of our lives.
California police psychologically tortured this guy during an investigation in which his father had disappeared. This is Thomas Perez Jr., he made the call that his father had disappeared. The police convinced this guy that his father was dead and that he killed him when his father was still alive. They threatened to euthanize his dog. They mentally tormented him and subjected him to sleep deprivation so that they could get the confession out of him. And there's more to this story. CNN actually did a follow-up. So this is a follow-up on the story that we were talking about. There's one more or two more pieces of evidence and two more pieces of information you really need to know to find out just how bad the Fontana, California police actually are.
The story you'll only hear on CNN. It's about a man named Tom Perez who called police for help. He thought his father was missing, but police came to believe he'd killed his father. And what happened next is stunning. CNN Shimon Prokupes has the story.
In August 2018, Tom Perez called Fontana, California police to report his elderly father missing.
Hello, this is CSOP with Fontana Police. So we're going to put him in the system right now as a missing person.
But 36 hours later, Perez was placed on a psychiatric hold for trying to take his own life. And the Fontana Police Department had gotten him to admit to a murder he never committed.
The guy is literally pulling out his own hair because of the psychological torture that the cops subjected him to. He's pulling out his own hair.
I was now in their little box of horrors. Their little box, as they call it.
Perez has never publicly spoken about what happened until now to CNN.
I felt like they were my captors. And I had nothing, there was nothing I could do.
Detectives at the Fontana Police Department brought Perez in for questioning over his missing father. He soon became their prime suspect.
It's really concerning to me that he hasn't been back yet.
They were convinced Perez's father had been murdered at the home the two shared. Police said Perez appeared suspicious, and they suspected a violent act based on broken furniture, and that some of his father's things were discarded. They also said they found some blood evidence inside the home. Perez told police the mess was from home renovations, and they were getting rid of things before selling it. After searching the home, police asked him to go to the station. That's when detectives turned a missing persons call into a 17-hour interrogation to get a confession. When they were not successful, they recruited Perez's close friend to help.
Dude, they got you on murder, They got you on murder.
So the cops, with no evidence, just fabricated a murder, said his dad was dead. They had no evidence to testify to that.
Impossible.
When the friend, who later said he regretted his involvement, didn't get a confession, the interrogators brought his pet dog Margot into the room.
You killed him. And he's dead. And your dog is sitting here looking at you, knowing that you killed your dad.
Detectives suggested that Margot might need to be put down.
These are the worst of the worst. These are the protectors and servants of the people who are fabricating a murder and trying to pin the murder on this guy and then psychologically wear him down by saying, your dog saw the murder, he saw the whole thing. Now they're going to threaten to kill his dog. The two most important things in this guy's life, his dad and his dog, and they're going to rip everything from him.
After witnessing such a traumatic event.
Just wanted to hold her. Not let go. And then they took her out of the room sometime after that. And felt like the end of the world for me.
Will you be here?
I've never, ever seen a situation where the police bring a dog this size through the police department. They transport there, walk it through the police department, bring it into an interrogation room, and use it as a tool in order to seek a confession. It's unconscionable. It's simply unconscionable.
Throughout the interrogation, Perez says he was suffering from mental health issues, but was denied medical help.
Are you gonna bring me my doctor? You wanna take me to the ER?
You don't need to go to the ER.
In the footage CNN reviewed, police lead a sleep-deprived and exasperated Perez into a confession.
Did you stab him?
I didn't think that I did.
But if you did, where would you have stabbed him?
It might have been the belly.
They got him to affirm suggestions they made to him. Like, well, you stabbed him. Okay, I stabbed him.
Distraught, psychologically beaten, and overwhelmed with grief, Perez says he tried to take his own life using his shoelace.
They attacked me right at the very things that I loved most. My fur baby and my father. And it doesn't seem like there's anything left. I couldn't see the reason to continue with more pain.
But his father wasn't dead.
Margot, I believe, was following me.
Police learned from Perez's sister that their father was unharmed, but Perez remained in the interrogation room.
They learned that Tom's father was alive and well and was at LAX airport ready to take a flight to go visit his sister. They didn't have the nerve to look him in the face. They didn't have the nerve to tell him his dad's okay.
They let me in that mental anguish and just suffer continually.
Police put him on a psychiatric hold at a hospital, where days later he finally learns his father is alive.
A younger nurse came over to my bedside and says, I know it says in your file that not to speak to anybody, any family members, but your dad's on the phone. I went, what? She handed the phone to me, and I just dropped to the floor crying because he was alive.
Wow.
5 days of hell. After he called the police for help, he is reunited with his father.
And he said, Dad, is that you? Is that really you? I said, yes. We had tears in our eyes.
Seeking accountability for what he endured, Perez filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Fontana.
Police officers are trained that they can engage in deception, but when you go over the line and you engage in deceptive action that would cause an innocent person to confess to a crime they didn't commit, that's where the line is crossed.
One of the detectives defended his actions in deposition video exclusively obtained by CNN.
I don't think that the police department would say we did anything wrong. We were just attempting to get some information from Mr. Perez, and that we had been with Mr. Perez all day, and we were running out of things to say to him to try to get the answer about where his father was located.
There is no...
Wait a second. Let's hear this again.
I don't think that the police department would say we did anything wrong.
You don't think the police department would say you did anything wrong? Well, how about you? You have a brain, you have a heart, you have a conscience. Do you think you did anything wrong? Let me ask you this. If the shoe was on the other foot, would you want somebody to treat you or somebody you loved in the way you treated Mr. Perez? No, absolutely not. And if you say, I wouldn't mind, then you're a psychopath or you're a liar or both. You're a psychopathic liar. Some of these guys were promoted. Nobody was fired. Nobody was disciplined. Nobody lost their job. But the tax cattle will pay $900,000 to Mr. Perez for what these psychos did.
Just attempting to get some information from Mr. Perez, and that we had been with Mr. Perez all day, and we were running out of things to say to him to try to get the answer about where his father was located.
We didn't know what else to say, so we just went ahead and lied. And we said, your dad is dead, and we're going to kill your dog if you don't come up with a confession. Don't think for a second it's an isolated case that these guys do this to people. Don't think it's isolated, that this only happened to Mr. Perez. This only happened at the Fontana, California Police Department. This is happening all over the place all the time. How many false confessions have they been able to manipulate people into? Now, I'm talking about law enforcement.
Feel like you're getting ripped off by your insurance company? Check this. I was paying $178 a month for car insurance, and now I'm only paying $34 a month. It's crazy.
Have they been able to manipulate people into? Now, I'm talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about sheriff's department and police departments all across this nation. Every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year. How many? How many people are sitting in jail right now who have confessed to a crime that they didn't commit because the cops lied to them, wore them down, psychologically tormented them into a confession?
There is no indication that there has been an internal review, and none of the officers involved have been disciplined. Several have been promoted.
Promoting the very people who would do this same thing to your mother, to your father, to your sons, to your brothers and sisters. These cops were promoted after doing this to this guy. In normal cases, If you do this to somebody, you've committed a crime, and not only do you lose your job, you go to jail. These cops should be in jail.
Earlier this year, Perez settled with the city for $900,000. The city issued a statement to CNN saying the settlement included no finding of wrongdoing. The city added that Perez was not isolated as claimed. He was given his medication and fed multiple times. For Perez and his father, the trauma continues.
No amount of compensation will ever compensate me for what I went through. Ever.
Shimon joins it.
But wait, there's more. Listen to this very last part right here.
Now, what happened after Perez was released from the hospital?
The investigation didn't end. I mean, they were so convinced that something happened in that house that the police, within an hour after Mr. Perez was released from the hospital, they went to a court and got a warrant to put a tracker on his vehicle.
But his father was alive.
But his father was alive. But they were, for whatever reason, they were so convinced that something happened, and they didn't give up for weeks. They kept investigating him. It's pretty crazy, right, Anderson?
Dad's alive. Nothing happened. They psychologically tormented this guy. There's a $900,000 settlement. Within an hour after releasing him from the hospital, they put a tracker on his car because they're convinced something had to have happened. And all this happened because somebody called the police for help. This is the kind of help the Fontana, California Police Department gave to Mr. Perez, and it's probably the same kind of help you can expect if you call them for help. Leave your thoughts about this in the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know.